Okay. So it's a little bit difficult for me to monitor the chat and everything. So I normally put somebody in charge of that. So Arsian, you want to be in charge of monitoring the chat, and so if somebody asks a question and I don't see it, just unmute and say, "Oh, Dr. Hunter, there's a question in the chat," or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. And it's
Okay.
Arslan, by the way.
Arslan. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you know, those fonts are kind of small. You
I
can't.
understand. Yeah, I'll be on chat too.
Okay. Okay. Great. And so I suppose the next order of business is everybody can hear me. So that's good. What I'd like you to do when we start a meeting is everybody in chat should just type here once. And that way I can go back and I can see who was here and who wasn't. And it'll be easy for me to, you know, award a little bit based on participation. Though obviously that's not the most important thing in the class. Still, it's important for us. So what I want to show you all next, and I suppose I'll ask if you have any questions before I do it. But I'm going to go through the syllabus really quickly. I'm going to talk about the class, and then I'll show you the website that we use for our homework and for exams and stuff like that, so that you can register and get started. But does anybody have any questions initially? General? No. Okay. Well, Arslan, you can let me know if something comes up in chat. And let's go ahead and stop sharing this. Okay. And
Dr. Hunter, we do have a question already. Joshua asks, is there a Blackboard?
Yeah, sure, there is. And I don't know, in fact, that's one of the things I'm going to show you. So you all should be able to see Blackboard right now. Can you see it, Arslan?
No, we can't see it. And in fact, on your screen, it says course is unavailable to students. Maybe it's not open yet.
Oh, I went ahead and I opened it, but let's double check. I can do that. Customization. Over here. Okay, so okay, so now it should be open for you guys to see. Everybody got the emails though for the announcements, so I guess that's how you guys are here. And I have a dog harassing me, so if you guys hear barking in the background, you know what's going on. So yeah, you guys should be able to see it now. And the most important thing that we have here is the syllabus. So when I asked if you guys could see it, I meant, could you see it on my screen? Since I'm sharing the screen right now.
We can see it.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, I'm gonna have to share this separately, but I just downloaded it. And stop share screen. And here we go. So now you should be able to see the syllabus. Check. Everybody good? So you can see the syllabus now, Arslan. If you guys want, there's the little emojis, and you can just give me a thumbs up in the emoji if you want to. Okay, good.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. So, as you know, my office is in building 1. It is room 337. It's here on the syllabus, I promise you. And so in terms of our regular meeting time, we're going to start at 7:45 a.m. and then we'll go through to about 9:30. I'll take a little break. So 7:45 to probably like 8:20, and take like a 10-minute break in there, and then begin the main lecture session at 8:30. The earlier part is obviously linked to the activity, and during that part we won't lecture. A few people haven't signed up for the activity, and again, I recommend it. I will say, and to the extent that you can look around, or you can ask other people that are familiar with the course. And honestly, the expectations of this course and the way that we go through the material is going to be a little bit different from what you're used to. I would go so far as to say that within the econ major, and this was true even back when I was getting my bachelor's degree, in 1994, that everybody has a story about intermediate micro, because it's really a pivotal course in the major. And if you take it in the right sequence, not everybody does, and in some sense it's sort of understandable, but it's supposed to present an overview of all of the models. So think about that for what I just said, all of the models. I didn't say one or a group, but all of the models that are used in microeconomic theory. And these days, I'm not saying that macro's any different, but macroeconomics today is built on microeconomic foundations. So we're going to talk about things like, just for example, utility functions and consumption functions, and those find their way into macroeconomics. So a lot of people think of macroeconomics today as being a subfield of micro, not being like, well, there's micro and there's macro, but you would be stuck. And if you know a little bit about macroeconomics, you would be stuck in a classical or Keynesian mind frame, circa the 1920s, 1930s, if you didn't include microeconomic foundations to macroeconomics. So all of the modern models use microeconomic foundations for the macroeconomic models. So microeconomics is the field. And so most people who are going to be, econ majors or econ minors, the best way to take this class is kind of in your junior year, just as soon as you finish principles of microeconomics. And I would say, hopefully after you've had a class in calculus, because once you get through this course, the rest of the major may be work, and econometrics is also one area that seems to be particularly challenging for a lot of students. Not everybody that's an econ major is going to take econ 44, but I will tell you, if you're going to be working as an economist, that a lot of people are going to expect that you have that skill set, and they'll look for it when they're reviewing your transcripts and thinking about hiring you. So the bottom line is that intermediate microeconomics covers a lot of material in a short period of time at a level of sophistication that is not, and I would say, it's not purely mathematical, though. It's really important to recognize, if you haven't already recognized this, that economics is an applied math discipline. So much in the same way that probability and statistics is applied mathematics, or electrical engineering is applied mathematics, or physics is applied mathematics. It's all the same math, but we have special language and ways that we interpret what comes out of the math. But the problem that a lot of students have, and occasionally, and this time I was contacted by one potential student who was reluctant to enroll in the activity portion of the class. And they said, hey, listen, like, I'm really good at math. And I'll tell you, I have students that are great in math, that don't do very well in the class. And it's because one of the really important things is, what you have to think about is, am I good at word problems? And there are a lot of people that, and if you think about it, physics and engineering and all the things that I talked about, and statistics and economics, it's just a continual parade of word problems. So being good at math, having mathematical skill is definitely essential, and I would say a primary component to success in this class and other classes that you're going to take. But if you don't understand what the language of the problems that you're trying to solve are asking, if you can't interpret the words in order to get to the right problem mathematically, then you're kind of dead in the water. And also, I would go so far as to say that, in our discipline, there are very, very few instances where the field advances on the strength of mathematics alone. Normally, the way that things move forward is that economists, people, are able to make new connections based on their understanding of real world economic phenomena, and relate that to mathematics in a sensible and persuasive way. So if you've not signed up for 4990A, and that's, again, the first part where we will actually, we got to get started a little bit with our theory, but then we'll pretty quickly get started there with solving problems in the morning. And like I was saying, I strongly recommend it, only because it seems to have helped a lot of students, and that's the way that it was designed. When we moved from the quarter system, where we had 4 hours, to the semester system where we only had 3, there was a big disconnect in the amount of time and the ability for me to cover everything that I had to cover in lecture, and to spend time focusing on solving problems a couple different times so people could get the hang of it. And so,
Dr. Hunter,
yeah.
Abigail asks, if we haven't signed up, should we email you to enroll?
Well, I think you should still be able to, right? We're still in the add drop period.
I've been trying to, actually, and it always tells me that like enrollment period is not open, something like that.
Oh, really? Because we just had people add this class, but because I thought I was going to be open even later. But yeah, I mean, if you need an add code because it won't let you add the class, then for sure email me. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, if you haven't signed up, please sign up. And like I said, it's one additional unit. It's no additional work. It counts as upper division credit. And it was actually this class and some of the econometrics classes where we saw that there was a need um, to spend some time just focusing on solving the problems. So we present a lot of theory, and the theory gives a foundation for where the problems are going to be. And we'll talk about the theory in the readings and in these lectures, but we'll just focus on problem solving at the beginning of the class. Okay. So, so we will meet regularly on Tuesdays, and other than that, I will also assign additional pre-recorded lectures. And when you see the pre-recorded lectures, please watch them carefully and take notes like you would in a regular lecture. And I think really the benefit is that you can probably stop and rewind. Again, there's a lot of nuance and subtlety in the language. Economists are a little bit, well, most people that are serious academics are careful in choosing their words, and that's because these subtleties really matter. So yeah, please think about those things. So in terms of the materials, what we rely on, and it's recommended, though not required, but if you're kind of looking for a bridge text, the Intermediate Microeconomics and Applications by Nicholson Snyder, the 12th edition, they're probably on the 14th edition now. The edition doesn't really matter. It's not like economics has changed a lot in the last 10 years at the undergraduate level. But it's nice to have a text available, and you can probably get a used copy on Amazon cheap. The required text is Introduction to Economic Analysis by McAfee and Lewis. It is available as an open access text. And if you're looking for a couple of other texts, maybe to refresh your memory, and notice what I'm suggesting, right? So I'm suggesting that, and I'm not, necessarily, I'm not sure that this has happened to a lot of other courses that you've been in, but so there are these open access texts at the principles level, and you may want to go back and review them, and then read the stuff in McAfee and Lewis, or in Nicholson and Snyder. Yeah. So, and that's also because, again, being an applied math discipline, you have to think about the way that math works, right? You can't really do multiplication without understanding addition. It all builds on each other. So if you don't understand the stuff at the principles level very well, then now's the time to kind of shore up those foundations so you can build on what we're trying to help you build. In terms of the substance of the grades, so a lot of students get a little bit, I don't know, nervous, right? When it comes to grading for this class, there are a couple of different reasons for that, but I think the main one is that you're going to have homework assignments that you're going to turn in through Blackboard. And again, if you talk to anybody else, I can give you reassurance, once here, or I might mention it again, but those are graded primarily at the end of the semester, even though you turn them in as the semester goes on, and they're graded based on substantial completeness. Substantial completeness means that if you get to a problem and you don't understand how to do it, you should write something down substantive about what you're struggling with, right? Why you don't understand this. And so the reason for that is then you can come back and lecture, and you can ask, helpful questions for yourself and potentially for others. Like, I didn't understand this term in the question. I couldn't, get the model right. and verify the solution because I didn't understand this piece or the other piece, and then I can explain it to you. But it's graded on substantial completeness because I want you to go through and attempt everything and put down an answer. And then obviously we have to go through the material. So you have to turn it in a particular time. And then, we move forward. But if you put down nonsense or nothing at all, or you don't turn anything in, then obviously at the end of the semester, when I review those materials, I'm not going to give you um, full credit for not putting something reasonable down. So if you're the type of person that you get nervous because you don't know what you got on the homework until the end of the semester, then you just have to put yourself in a reasonable frame of mind. Obviously, I've been teaching here at Cal Poly for almost 20 years, and I'm probably as reasonable as you're going to find in terms of the way that I approach grading. But it's 10% of your grade. So one of the things to think about is each homework assignment that you're going to potentially turn in would be about 2% of your grade. If you miss one, it's not fatal, right? And I would go so far as to say that nobody, and there's a little bit more in here in the grading policies, nobody has failed this class merely because they didn't do a good job on the homework assignments. So obviously, if you want to be an A student, you got to do great on everything. But if you do a good job on the exams, that's where most of the points are. And so the exams count for 90% of your grade. The way that the class is designed is to be 3 exams. So it's usually 2 midterms and a final exam, and they each count for 30% of your grade. And that's here on the syllabus 2 in the last paragraph. And then there's a little bit more about the details of the grading. Basically, the course is curved for grades B- and above. So if you're expecting to be in the top of the distribution of the class, then you're certainly competing against other people for the best grades in the class. But if your objective is to just pass the class, you're only competing against the standard, which is if you get 70% or above on every single exam, you're going to pass the class with a C- or better. That's never going to be an issue. But if you're going for one of the top grades, then everything matters. And in particular, one of the things that I'll give you guys a heads up about to kind of help organize your effort, besides being able to interpret and solve all the problems, that's fine. We spend a lot of time in the class and lecture graphing and interpreting graphs that are associated with the material and showing how to present our work in solving the problems. Because even though there are certain problems that will ask for a particular result, right? There are intermediate steps that we'll go through when we solve them that are important in presenting the work. So, and those intermediate steps, actually, there's information there, even though it may not be called for in the final solution. So the idea is that, if you're a good economic analyst and somebody asks you something that's on an intermediate step, and I'll just throw out something that may be meaningless right now to you, but it turns out to be important, is this idea of the marginal rate of substitution. So, what is the marginal rate of substitution for, this particular set of goods or something like that? Well, it isn't I don't think there's a single problem in the entire class that asks you to actually calculate the marginal rate of substitution directly, but rather we use it to calculate some other things. But that doesn't mean it's not important. It just didn't happen to show up in a particular a question that was asked. So now I'm thinking I should maybe ask a question about it. But the point is that it'll show up in an intermediate step. And if I don't see that intermediate step in your solution, then you know, I might not give you full credit for a particular answer, right? So documenting your work is important, and you should get in good habits. And you know, in terms of differentiating between people that are doing a great job and the people that are doing a good job but not a great job, um, you know, the level of detail and the clarity of the presentation matters too. If your work is clear and well documented, and you'll see on the exams, um, you know, you have to document them by hand, and you turn them in a PDF document at the end that you upload to Blackboard through the Turnitin resource. We'll go through that, but um, the clarity of the work presented, the clarity of the graphs um, becomes important. And so again, I mentioned the graphs because for each exam, the graphs that are asked for you to reproduce count for about 15% of the exam grade. So right there, you can see that's like between 85% and 100%. So a lot of students that, you know, if you're thinking about, okay, I want to be, you know, at the top of the curve, I want to get a great grade in this class, then a lot of what you end up competing against is everybody that's, you know, getting a B or better has solved all the problems correctly, but the students that are doing the best in the class are also doing a great job of presenting the graphs that are asked for, that are in good detail, and so that stuff matters too. But if you're sitting back and just saying, gosh, you know, like, I want to make sure I understand this stuff, but I just want to make sure that I pass the course because it's required for the major, don't worry about that. I mean, obviously you want to work on those skills too. They're all important for the major, but you're not competing against anybody. Okay, so, and then you'll notice that at the bottom of this, there's, and all of our you know, schedule is tentative. It's preliminary. So we'll work through the material, but this is basically the order in which we'll work through the material in the McAfee and Lewis text. Now, I will tell you that when you start to see the material in McAfee and Lewis, a lot of it is presented in terms of calculus, and technically speaking, I think now everybody is required to take at least business calculus for our major. But my presentation doesn't assume that, so in terms of the lectures in class and what I go through, doesn't assume that anybody knows calculus. If you do know calculus, it's a big help. But if you don't know calculus well, then there are a few formulas we're going to talk about that are important later on in the course, and you just have to memorize them. But, you know, I think there are only maybe 3 such formulas that you'll have to memorize, and you have to memorize them well enough you know what they mean and what's going on. But if you look in the McAfee and Lewis text, you'll see that their presentation relies on knowing calculus. And if that's ends up becoming some sort of a barrier, you can ask me about it, but also the intermediate text by Nicholson and Snyder does a really good job of separating out the presentation so it doesn't assume calculus. Okay, so now I will go ahead and
Dr. Hunter,
yeah.
Joshua asks, what's the cutoff for a B minus, like the percent for a B minus?
Well, so it's B minus and above, right? Is where the curve applies. So my dogs are barking. So but yeah, so again, Joshua, so at the top of the curve, it's going to be more or less rank ordered, right? And but generally speaking, yeah, I mean, once you get into those standard ranges, normally, you know, above 80 and above 90, you're going to be, you know, in the B minus B range and A minus A range. The only people that normally end up getting squeezed is sometimes the curve itself ends up being such that, you know, maybe somebody who got a 95 in total points is the person that got a top grade in the class, and you know, they are going to get an A, right? But normally it's not a thing where, you know, I have, you know, 20 people that all have 100%. That's never happened. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fair enough to think of the standard 70, 80, 90 as guidance, right? So that's fair enough. But obviously with a curve, the idea of the curve, right, is that you're rank ordered. so you're competing against each other, right? And so I don't know, before the curve is established, what total points are going to be needed for a particular grade. Does that make sense? And this is, and you said who was asking that? Was it Joshua?
It was Joshua, yeah.
Yeah. So Joshua, is that clear?
He says yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, any other questions? I was just opening up the chat myself to see. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Okay, good. So I'll stop share. And now I will show. Okay. So this is our website. Now I want to tell you all that I've been using this website for a long time. And so this is where we do our homework practice and our exams and everything like that. The thing is that you won't be able to see everything that you need to see until you actually subscribe to the site. And so if you'll see at the top, once you register, there'll be an account, and then you can manage your subscription. The subscription fee is $35 for the semester. So it's reasonable, but I used it before for a macroeconomics class, and so when you first sign up, if you don't subscribe, you'll just see the material for the macroeconomics class. But once you go ahead and subscribe, then it'll look just like what you see here. And actually, so some of it is again left over from macroeconomics, but you can see a little bit about me. Um, not that it matters especially. I can assure you that my credentials are good for teaching this class. So can Arslan, can you see the Micro 2 Ignithium website now?
On the screen, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. And so I'll put it here. So it's HTTPS. I always do the TTPS because it should redirect you to a secure connection, but I've had students before, if they don't put the TTPS, it'll take them to an unsecured connection. So that's the web address. And what we'll spend most of our time doing is under the practice tab here, you'll see that there are a bunch of different questions available. And so where we'll spend most of our time at the beginning of this class, the class is basically divided into 3 sections. And the first section is what I would call a thorough review of demand and supply. And so that's basically, other than this little math review, there are the first 3 sections have to do with the supply and demand model. And I will tell you that almost all of the stuff that you're going to do in economics is related to demand and supply. I imagine that there are going to be a few extensions of demand and supply, at least the way that it's talked about in this course, that are not familiar. But it's just an extension of what you learned at the principles level. There's nothing, surprising or really new in that sense. The second part of the class has to do with the foundations of demand. And it has to do, in particular, the foundations of demand come from what we call the consumer choice model. How does a consumer, given a fixed budget, choose between different goods to purchase based on, the price of the good that they observe in the market? And so that may or may not be new depending upon who you had principles with. I don't spend much time talking about the consumer choice model, if I mention it at all, in principles, because there's not really enough time to cover it in any depth. So, but here, really a big difference between lower division economics and upper division economics is where we introduce what I talked about before when I was mentioning how macroeconomics uses microeconomics foundations. We introduce utility functions, and the utility functions are ultimately what guide consumers' choices. And so there are a lot of interesting things that you can do with or analyses that you can perform using utility functions and information about consumers' budgets. But what we want to focus on is that they give us a way to explain in more detail where demand comes from. And that's important for a lot of different reasons. So when we get there, we'll talk about it. And then the last part of the class has to do with not the foundations of demand, but the foundations of supply. And so we spent a lot of time talking about the problem of the firm, or the profit maximization problem of the firm. But again, we covered a level of sophistication, and we introduce game theory to talk about how firms in non-competitive markets make decisions. So a lot of you in my principles of microeconomics class, I do talk about the Nash equilibrium, again, at an elementary level, introduce the concept. But towards the end of the class, we'll be talking about game theory at a different level of sophistication. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up, most Nash equilibrium demonstrations that are given at principles level involve what we call game matrices. So they have fixed payoffs represented in a table. And rather than dealing with fixed payoffs, here we deal with payoff functions. So that means that the payoffs aren't a certain value, like $100. Rather, they're related to the quantity of output. So yeah, you end up getting a function, and you have these continuous rather than discrete payoffs. So that allows us to do things again that we couldn't do if we were stuck looking at tables all day. So yeah, so we do supply and demand, foundations of demand, foundations of supply. Those are the three topics, and those are really the three exams that you're going to be dealing with. So today, what I'd like to do is hopefully everybody will go ahead and get signed up and subscribed to micro2.ignifium.com, and I'm going to assign the math review. And so the reason why I really like this this program is, you see there's this change problems feature. And so that means that the problems are randomly generated. And because they're randomly generated, sometimes there are things that, you know, are goofy that show up. So you have to be a little bit discerning when you look at the question. So for example, here you see, this doesn't really make, I mean, I guess it could make sense, but if I saw a problem like this, I would worry about whether or not the random generator properly generated a problem. And so if you see something like that, you don't have to. So every time you log in, a different person logs in, there's going to be a different set of problems, right? And if you look over the problems and you're like, these look kind of goofy, like honestly, and I don't know if it'll change it, but I don't like the zero either. So I could change the problems again, and eventually maybe I'll end up getting some that I like. But so yeah, so I think these look pretty good. The other thing that's nice, and I have it turned on, so it's a feature you can turn on and turn off, but notice that the hints are actually the answer. And that's going to be true for all of the practice problems, right? So what that enables you to do is to change the problems and change the problems and change the problems, and practice and practice and practice, so that you're comfortable with the solutions and being able to demonstrate and calculate the solutions. So it's really the infinite practice and the variety of problems. And so what that means is that when you take the exam in this class, there aren't going to be any surprises. you're going to have seen every problem. I think, you know, if I have to really think carefully, I think that there may be one of the exams where I have one problem that's different from the problems that appear in practice, but obviously they're very closely related. But but almost all, so I'm not guaranteeing every single one, but almost every question that shows up on an exam is a question that is available on the practice. So the difference is, right, that when you go to take the exam, you know, the universe of random possibilities is something on the order of like 10,000. So you'll be seeing a different version of the problem than the one that you worked on in practice. The numbers will be different, the question will be the same. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to you know, get good at the problem solving techniques. You know, this isn't a class where I'm trying to surprise you with trick questions. The only place where there'll be something sort of novel on the exam, and as you know, we go through the semester, you'll see there, I spent a lot of time on certain graphs, is that there will be you know, questions asking you to graph some of the you know, graphs that demonstrate some of the graphs that we've been using while we've been explaining how to solve these problems. And but apart from that, as of today, you have, you know, once you subscribe, you have all of the exam questions right now. So all you have to do is, between me and you, hopefully with my help, figure out how to solve them so you're comfortable. And also, I should say, as a little bit of a heads up, the randomness also facilitates this sort of online instruction, because we have a time limit for the exam, and everybody that's going to be taking the exam is going to have different questions, you know, so different numbers. You aren't going to really have time to collaborate with one another. Besides the fact that there's also a curve to consider. So that means, you know, Johnny helps out Sally, then he's also hurting himself if he's competing for one of the best grades in the class. But like I said, I don't really, you know, I think I take academic honesty and integrity seriously, and I think everybody should. But I don't really worry about it in this class, because it's, you know, it's difficult if somebody's not going to try to do their own work. Okay, so that's a basic overview, and I'm going to go ahead and put up the chat again, and I'll ask, are there any questions?
I have a quick question. Are we graded on these practice questions, or is it just for review?
No, so what I'm going to ask you to do is, like, for example, for the math review, as a homework assignment, you should go and get a version that you like, right, and print it. And you're actually going to then, you know, demonstrate all your work and give the solutions, even though the solutions are there. It's really about showing your work, right, how you got there. In terms of figuring out whether or not, like I said, if your homework's substantially complete. So, but yeah, the actually, like, submitting homework answers, there's, like, the answer's already there, right? It wouldn't make any sense unless I turned that off and instead had you guys, you know, submit, you know, onto the site. But I decided not to do that, because it seems to me it's much better for you guys to have infinite practice available, and then just submit a hard copy in for one of them demonstrating, your solution technique. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay, sure. Okay, so other questions, concerns, ideas? Yeah, the hard copy will be turned in on Blackboard. That's right. I set them up as a Turnitin assignment. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Okay, I gotta mute somebody. Okay. Yeah, I set it up as a Turnitin assignment. And yeah, and yeah, handwritten. So Michael, again, what you would do is you would go, and I'll demonstrate for you. So here's the math review. I'm gonna go file, I guess, print, right? And so now I have a hard copy. You see, Michael? Can you see that I clicked print? Can you see the print?
We can see.
Yeah. And then I would go ahead and I would print it. And then, yeah, so the handwritten part is, and what I recommend students do is print it out. And so I'm going to hit cancel and then go and look at all the hints and write down, because these are all the answers, right? And just write them down. When you print it out, there'll be this little blank part for hint. You can just write down the actual hint there. And then you're going to attach to that your solutions, right? Like, how did you get that one? So for example, what is the area of a triangle with height 122 and base 10, right? Well, you remember the formula for area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So you write down the formula, area A equals 1/2 B times H, and then write in your base and your height and calculate your area. So you demonstrated your work, right? And then, so I say you write that down by hand, and take a picture of it, and then go ahead and put your picture in a Word document or something like that, and then upload it to Blackboard. The one thing I want to tell you guys, and I'll try to mention this on Blackboard in an announcement, but you want to type into your Word document something like a title, your name, Michael Left, Dr. Hunter, EC4401, Spring. Yeah, you can make it as a PDF, but you still want to have a Word document that you make into a PDF. And I'm explaining why, Jeremiah. And then something, Spring 2021, because when you turn it in to Turnitin looks for original characters, and it wants at least 20 of them. Okay. And so I'm not, for this class, I'm not using Turnitin for like a plagiarism detection thing, but rather for me at the end, the grading features associated with the Turnitin assignments make it easier for me to assign the final grades when I'm calculating them for homework or other things like that. Nevertheless, the Turnitin program is going to look for some typing in your document. If you don't have any typing, it just won't let you upload it. So but we'll see as we go along, how that works. Yeah, Abigail, it's for both, right? So you'll see, and don't like mess with this yet, because if you do, you're not going to be able to do much messing. And plus, when we actually get to doing our assessments, if I go under the assessments tab, you'll notice that there's this stuff, right? And you have a separate registration and login process. And again, please don't mess around with it, because if you do, I'll have to go in and delete stuff and whatever. When we're getting close to assessments, I'll take you guys to the assessments page and we'll do it together, just to make sure that everything, is working and recording well, for your assessments. But yeah, we have practice, Abigail, and we have assessments. And yeah, and that's why I was saying is that, literally, and you can kind of see from here, right? You see how it's just reproducing under the sample. It's just reproducing what we actually just saw in the algebra and geometry review. And so again, for your guys' exams, if we go back to practice, I can tell you already what's going to be on your first exam. It's going to be some of these questions and some of these questions and some of these questions. And I don't believe that on this first exam, there's even one question that isn't already on these first 3 assignments. Okay. So when we do the assessment, I just ask it to pull over the questions of those. I don't know, there's like 35 questions. I ask it to pull over like 20 of the questions that I want to use for the assessment. And by the way, I will give you guys, yeah, and you'll be creating the graphs by hand. Yeah. And it's a good question about graph paper. And, honestly, you don't really need graph paper. Notebook paper is fine, or just blank printer paper works well too. Because the scale doesn't matter usually. Even though I want you guys and girls, I want you all to draw accurate graphs. Mostly in economics, our graphs are really illustrations. Okay, and so it's the features of the illustrations, and there are a few key things you want to denote with respect to labels and things like that. But it's more about getting the overall features and details, not really about like, is this 1 unit or is it 2 units? A lot of times, applied mathematicians play with scale and things like that because there's certain things they want to see. Well, Jeremiah, yeah. So I don't care if you want to like use a graphing calculator, but you'll still have to draw the result out by hand, if you get my meaning. And I will tell you that for most of the graphing that we'll be doing in this class, a graphing calculator will be of pretty limited use. So again, because what we're dealing with are, we call them graphs, but like I said, they're more properly called illustrations that capture the features of the problem that we want to explain or demonstrate to a potential audience. And, with all illustrations that have, let's say, analytic or quantitative material you're trying to communicate to an audience, you don't, like I said, the exact mathematical accuracy sometimes um, makes the presentation ugly, and it obscures what you're trying to demonstrate. So I'm okay if you want to try to use a graphing calculator, but please don't take a picture of something on a graphing calculator or a website and use that. You won't see me do anything like that in class. I'll draw all of the graphs by hand, and that's what I'd like you to do. If you use something to help orient you or whatever, if that's useful, I don't have any problem with that. Obviously, I can't. I don't have the and I haven't subscribed or asked you guys to subscribe to any of those programs where they monitor you while you take the exam and all that stuff. In reality, if you were in your office someplace and you're trying to, do something, and you were to use a graphing calculator to help you, no one would complain. I don't complain about that, but still, at the end, you got to get the right stuff in the right way. So, okay. Other questions? Okay. All right. So, seeing there are no further questions, I'll stay on for a minute, and I will